Today we're going to talk about percents and fractions. Keep in mind, when we talk about percent, we mean per meaning out of, cent meaning 100. So percent means out of 100 or per 100. And when we talk about fractions, hopefully we remember that per means over as well. So a percent is a ratio is a fraction, whose denominator is 100. The symbol for percent, hopefully we all recognize. Percents can be used to talk about a certain portion of 100. So if we look at this picture up here, there are 100 squares, and if you count the number of shaded boxes, each row is 10, each column is 10, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 85 shaded squares out of 100, so we would write that as the ratio 85 over 100, which because it's over 100, that means per 100, that is a percent. So 85% is the same thing as 85 over 100. One of the things we need to be able to do with percents is to take a percent and write it as a fraction. And again, with fractions, we always want to leave our answer in simplest form. So a couple of examples we'll look at would be 29% and 45%. Well, because they are percents, we want to write them over 100. So 29% is simply 29 over 100. Since 29 and 100 don't have any common factors, it cannot be reduced. 45%, again, we write it as 45 over 100, but because 5 goes into both of those numbers, if we divide the numerator and denominator by 5, we end up with 9 over 20. Keep in mind, it's always important that we write our fractions in lowest terms or simplest form. We also need to be able to take fractions and write those as percents. Well, one of the things we've already learned this year is how to take a fraction and write an equivalent fraction by setting it up as a proportion. So 7 over 10 is important to know, but to convert that into a percent, we need to write it as an equivalent fraction over 100. So when we do that, we take 7 over 10. We need to turn our denominator into 100, so we should be able to know that if we multiply 10 by 10, that'll be 100. So if we multiply our denominator by 10, we need to also multiply our numerator by 10. So 7 times 10 would give us 70 over 10 times 10, which is 100. So 7/10 is equal to 70 over 100, and because it's over 100, we can then call it a percent, 70%. Similarly, we could convert a fraction like 3/5 to a percent. Instead of multiplying by 10 like we did on the last problem, what we're going to need to do is multiply this one by 20, because 5 times 20 is 100, or 5 goes into 120 times. So if we multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 20 this time, that's going to end up with 60 over 100, which is equal to 60%. At this point, why don't you go ahead and try a few examples. Here are 2 examples where you change a percent to a fraction, and 2 examples where you'll change a fraction to a percent. At this point, press pause on the recording, work out these problems, and then I will work them out and you can check your answer. Okay, so 51%, I'm going to write that as 51 over 100. And because 51 and 100 don't have any common factors, it can't be reduced. If we take 25%, I'm going to write that as 25 over 100. And because 25 goes into both of those, 25 divided by 25 is 1, 100 divided by 25 is 4, so that reduces to 1/4. Which should make sense, because if you think about American money, 1/4 is 25 cents, or 25 out of 100 cents. Now we're going to take a few fractions and change those into percents. So again, I don't care what 11 over 20 is. I need to write this as some sort of a fraction over 100. So hopefully I can remember that 20 times 5 gives me 100. So if I multiply times 5 on the bottom, I also have to remember to multiply times 5 on the top. and 11 times 5 would give me 55 over 100. And because it's over 100, it's now a percent. So 55%. And for the last problem, we want to turn this into a fraction over 100 before we can call it a percent. So I need to multiply times 4 on the bottom, or denominator, and times 4 on the numerator to give me 16 over 100, which is 16%. How'd you do? Hopefully you did well. Continuing on, there are some common percent to fraction conversions that you should memorize. First of all, anything that is a multiple of 10% would be a multiple of 1/10. So 10% is 1/10. 20% would be 2/10, which reduces to 1/5. 30% is 3/10. 40% is 4/10, which would reduce to 2/5. 50% is 5/10, which would reduce to 1/2. 60% would be 6/10, which would reduce to 3/5. 70% is 7/10. 80% is 8/10, which again would reduce to 4/5. 90% is 9/10, and 100% would be 10/10 or a whole. All of would mean 100% of. Additionally, you should also know 25% and any multiple of 25%. 25% would be 1/4 or 1/4. In other words, a quarter is 25 cents. 75 cents would be 3/4 or 3/4. It would be helpful for you to memorize this chart, so please refer back to it if you ever need to. Let's look at an example at this point. We've talked about probabilities already as being the total number of successful outcomes over the total number of possible outcomes. So far, we've left these as fractions. Commonly, proportions are left as a percentage. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those fractions that we've already figured out as a probability and convert those to percents. So if a radio station randomly selects 1 out of 5 finalists for a prize, and you're one of the finalists, what's the probability that you would win? Write your answer as a percent. Well, to write it as a fraction, we're going to say that it's 1 over 5, or 1/5. Okay. We then need to convert that to a percentage, so we're going to write it as a fraction over 100, or we memorize from the chart that 1/5 is 20%. Another way we could have gotten to 20% is by saying 1/5 is equal to what over 100, multiply it times 20, and you're going to get 20 over 100, which is 20%. Suppose now we take that same example, instead of there being 5 finalists, there are 10 finalists. What is the probability that you would win now? Write your answer as a percent. Press pause right now as you figure that out. Okay, so there are 10 finalists, so you are one of 10 finalists, which means you have a 1 in 10 chance of winning. We want to either remember that from the chart, 1/10 would be 10%, or we want to convert that into a fraction over 100, so we multiply it times 10 on the top and the bottom to get 10 over 100, which is a 10% chance now. Hopefully you got that correct. Going on a little bit further, a reminder of what we'd learned early in the year and also in previous math classes. In math, a lot of times when you see the word of, it means to multiply. So half of a number means 1/2 times that number. So another way we can find the percent of a number would be by realizing what the word of means. So in this case, we have a desert tortoise that can go a year or more without drinking water. But when it does drink, its body weight can increase by up to 40%. Suppose a desert tortoise weighs 15 pounds after a long period without water. How many pounds can the tortoise gain when it drinks? Well, it's a big, long paragraph, and what we need to be able to do with a word problem like this is to read through it once like we just did, and then go back through and pick out kind of the important parts of that question. Since we're going to be doing the math of it, we need to particularly pay attention to the numbers that are in there. So what we know is body weight can increase by 40%, and it currently weighs 15 pounds. So what the question is really asking us is, how much can it gain? Well, it can gain 40% of its current weight. So the question is asking us, what is 40% of 15? So what we're going to want to do then is to convert that 40% into a fraction. And because we have the word of there, we're going to take that fraction and multiply it times 15. So in this case, 40% would be 2/5, 4 out of 10, which would reduce to 2/5. So we're taking 2/5 of 15, that would be times 15, and we multiply that just like we would multiply any other set of fractions. You can either multiply to get 30 over 5, or we could have reduced first, the 5 and the 15. Either way, we're going to reduce to an answer of 6. So that 15-pound desert tortoise can gain up to 6 pounds when it drinks. Here are a few examples for you to try. Again, remember, we want to take our percent, convert it to a fraction, and then multiply it times the number that we're trying to find the percent of. Press pause now and attempt these 4 problems. Okay, so we know that 25%, we can either write it as 25 over 100, or hopefully we remember that that reduces to 1/4, or a quarter is 25%. So we were going to take 1/4 of, which means multiply, 36, and I'm going to put it as 36 over 1. Now we can either multiply straight across the numerator and the denominator to get 36 over 4, or what I recommend to my kids is reduce before we multiply. If any numerator or denominator has a common factor, we can cancel them out. So 4 goes into itself once, 4 goes into 36 9 times. So now we're left with 1 times 9, which is 9, over 1 times 1, which is 1. So our answer then becomes 9. 70%, again, means 70 over 100, which we can reduce to 7 out of 10, or 7 over 10. Of means multiply, 70, so if I put that over 1, again, I can reduce the 10 with the 70. 10 goes into itself once, 10 goes into 70 7 times. And I'm left then with 7 times 7, which is 49, over 1 times 1, which is 1. So our answer is 49. For number 8, 50%, hopefully we all know, means 1/2 of 14, means 1/2 times 14. Well, half of 14, hopefully we know, is 7. And for the third one, let's see who's advanced. 75%, how many of you knew that that answer was, or that converts to 3/4? Hopefully all of you. If not, you would have written it as 75 over 100, and then reduced that fraction. Of means multiply, times 80. I'm going to reduce the 4 with the 80. 4 goes into itself once, 4 goes into 80 20 times. So I'm left now with 3 times 20, which is 60, over 1 times 1, for an answer of 60. And this is how we convert fractions to percents, percents to fractions, and find the percent of a number. Thanks for watching.